Look at that. Look like a baby. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, Angelus Mortem Productions. I'm glad you could join me today. Throughout this series, Canadian Crypts, when I review Canadian bands city by city, I've encountered a lot of musicians who just amaze me with how much work and effort they put into their tunes, the release schedules and all that stuff. And knowing that the odds are against them most of the time, they still don't give up and they try to get their music out there. But there is one city that I do have a personal connection with, and that is of course Windsor, Ontario, where I've experienced some of the best memories of my life between 2018 and 2019. Whether you're talking about venues like the Dominion House and Tavern, Backstage, Rockstar Music Hall, or now defunct places like the Beer Exchange, Coach and Horses, Blind Dog, Chubby Pickle, I mean the list goes on, and the incredible talent coming out of this town can just not be ignored. But now, due to the pandemic, these venues are at risk, and even if they weren't, there's no ability to play shows, and metal, punk, and hardcore bands just have nowhere to play locally, so that has put the scene to a bit of a grinding halt, unfortunately, and this isn't even exclusive to Windsor because this is happening all over the world right now. So before anybody dares to forget how incredible the Windsor metal scene is, I just want to make this video, a few videos, talking about some of the bands that have come out of there. This is just in honor of all the promoters, bookers, photographers, video people, and fans alike who get huge bands to come down to Windsor, local bands to open up for them, and just have created this incredible environment for a good, thriving scene. So we're gonna do the long overdue Canadian Crypts, Windsor, Ontario, Canada. Also, like I just said, this will be in parts, so if you see a band that you want to see in this type of video, make sure to leave a comment, because there is a good chance that I haven't heard of them yet, or that I just haven't explored the really nether underground to discover every single project that existed in the city. So feel free to recommend whatever you want, but right now I just want to bring it back to the old school and talk about where it all started. And I think as far as extreme metal goes, a foundational band that comes immediately to mind is Carcinogen, of course. Carcinogen formed around, I think, 1991 or 92, and they dropped 4 demos between the years of 93 and 96. They go for a lot of US style death metal that was going on around at the time, which was still a developing sound, but I'd say even for that time, they were absolutely crushing. Seriously, they didn't fuck around. I love their first 2 demos, especially Perseverance. They're just completely relentless, raw, crushing death metal demos, and you can find them still on YouTube.
Many bodies and minds of individuals, they can distort the reality in motion.
Then their last release, Demoralized, did have a little bit of progressive death metal influence from maybe an Edge of Sanity or Gorguts, so Carcinogen was definitely onto something moving forward. Unfortunately, these guys did break up, so we never really got to see what a Carcinogen full-length would have looked like, so I don't know, I mean, the demos are on tape. They're pretty hard to find. It's pretty much lost media at this point. I suppose if someone collected them all together and released a compilation, that'd be the closest thing to it. So although Carcinogen didn't make a ginormous impact on like the Ontario scene as a whole, they're really an unknown band, even to this day. I would say that they're very important in this context because they birthed the new generation. You see, a long time ago, there was a little boy who lived on the same street as this band. And this kid heard these guys rehearsing in their garage. Straight up just walked up and got invited to watch them rehearse. This kid grew up to end up playing drums, being in multiple bands himself, promoting the shit out of these bands, his own as well as others, hosting shows, making shit happen, building and building this scene that we have today, and he is going to leave a legacy behind that I think few are able to achieve in their local scenes. Ladies and gentlemen, you probably know who I'm talking about already if you're from Windsor, but if you don't, boys and girls, Tyson Blaste, our Lord and Savior. The main reason I hyped him up so much just now is because I know he's a really humble guy, so he's gonna fucking hate it when I'm sucking his dick this hard. Love you, Tyson. Now, his start musically goes back a pretty long way, not to call him old or anything, but he was appearing in hardcore punk bands at first, like ADHD, for example.
Yeah, that's ADHD was my first band. It was like a hardcore punk band. And yeah, like our vocalist at the time was a welder, and he had like more money than all of us. We were just like broke kids, and like he's like, "You're gonna play drums for my band. I know, I've heard you could play." And I was like, "Okay," like not really, but okay. Like
a lot of these old like snippets about his life and his early career you can find in actually one of the first videos I ever uploaded to this channel, where I did in fact interview Tyson Blaste in the basement of the Dominion House and Tavern. At some point, Mr. Blaste also dipped his fingers into PR and booking, and he uses the moniker Black Market Booking to get some credible talent and credible bands to come down to Windsor. Some that stick out to me are, of course, the Beyond Creation show we had, Inanimate Existence came down to, and many, many others. But let's see what he's up to these days. I think we're gonna just start right off the bat with his main project, Trenchlung. And I hope you're ready for this one, because I'm not.
Construction of a living organism was clearly bare of any kind of covering. There lie truly bizarre aspects to its design.
Trenchlung formed out of the ashes of the Apex around 2018, and they have 2 releases out so far. They have an EP called Petrichor, and they have a full-length titled High-Ray, and also features Dan Yee on guitars and Danny Sergenak on vocals, and these guys went for a sound that is just completely unheard of. Dan, in fact, lives out of Melbourne, Australia, so it is a little bit difficult for him to come down and tour with the band in Canada. So them playing live as a full unit is actually a pretty rare and special treat, and you bet your ass the fucking venue fills up every time it happens. Like, all 5 times. The strings on High Wraith are a lot of things coming together at once. You can obviously hear the technical death metal coming through clear as day, the bulk of the album consisting of all these dissonant chords and really like avant-garde transitions that just kind of throw you deeper and deeper into this chasm of insanity. This is paired up pretty ambitiously actually with mathcore, which unfortunately that's not a genre that I have a lot of experience in, but I remember Tyson telling me something about how Dillinger Escape Plan did influence a lot on High Wraith, and I can definitely see that in the music. Track 2 features a menacing amount of groove that is really just hard to put into words. All of these layers stack on top of you like a huge tower, ready to crush you underneath its weight.
That's
It reminds me of the energy, the pure essence of an anxiety attack, condensed into a singularity, size of a needle in space, ready to create a black hole at any moment. Like, it's intense stuff, guys. Then you have songs like 4 that go for a bit of a more stripped down musical structure, even featuring a breakdown that ends up repeating itself 4 times, so there is some variety amongst all this dissonant chaos. The actual concept of this album is a little hard to describe, so just bear with me here, but as far as I remember, it's about a human. Let's call him Bob. Bob gets a visit from this esoteric, Lovecraftian, cosmic being on another plane of reality, and he begins taunting Bob with visions of fire, death, and destruction. And I think Bob gets a choice between assimilating his powers and betraying humanity, or he, like, saves the planet. I don't really remember the whole thing. But the cover of High Wraith is actually this cosmic being in the flesh. And as you can see, there's a lot of freaking detail put into this concept, way more than what I'm describing right now. So I guess on a metaphorical level, Trenchlung is trying to break down the parts of the human consciousness and stripping down this character into like this mindless, instinct-driven machine, easily manipulated by higher life forms who use the human nature found in all of us to turn each other against each other, if that even makes any sense. What I'm trying to say is that High Wraith is extremely ambitious and Trenchlung is doing shit that I really haven't seen. I really haven't seen a lot of like this blackened tech death with the math core and just the fucking huge production on top of this thing. It all comes together. So we're starting off really, really strong here. Highly recommend Trenchlung if you haven't listened to it already. Now let's get into the aforementioned The Apex, another crazy fucking band. These cats formed around 2014 or 15, and they really only have 2 releases as well, an EP and a self-titled, straight out of the gate with the self-titled, and they took the Windsor scene completely by storm. Now, I'm pretty confident in saying that what the Apex was doing would pretty much be the prelude to Trenchlung's sound, because the 2 groups are quite similar. On the self-titled, the Apex also doesn't really waste their time with traditional structures. They have this just absolute monolith, this beast of a sound throwing itself at you all at once. There's a lot of punchiness in these robust sounding guitars and the drums and the bass. It really all comes together in this kind of like whirlwind of brutality. Even the vocals, which aren't offbeat or anything, they do appear quite randomly. It kind of reminds me of like a Crazy Benighted song where the guy just fucking screams his head off. The production too is a lot less abrasive than on Trenchlung, and actually I think a worthy comparison would be to another band that I covered from Tilbury on this channel, titled Dismata. Although Dismata and Trenchlung are different in theme and writing, I could compare the self-titled to an album like Understand. The drumming here from Tyson is absolutely superb as well, like on Means to an End. Then there's tracks that are just totally nuts, like "You're Not Dead Yet." It actually ends with a question mark, like "You're not dead yet?" Like,
why don't you die?
The Girl Left Dead actually has a soft, atmospheric segment with some progressive grooves, and this sound actually carries itself over one more time to the second track right after, Contention Chapter 1. So there is a bit of like a melodic, emotional ending to all this fucking chaos. And that's the self-titled for you, but then we also have an EP that came out after titled Underbelly, which really, I mean, this is just kind of a DLC expansion pack to what we heard already, but it is worth listening to if you want to just add to the entire Apex experience. I think Underbelly, the title track, has to be the most entertaining with how it just immediately launches itself at you like a wild animal. It's fucking awesome.
How do we get back to the way we were before? All this dying of soul and painful death.
So yeah, definitely check out Underbelly, definitely check out the self-titled if you're into this kind of stuff. If you want the full experience, I would really recommend checking out the entire Apex discography and then going right into Trenchlung so your brain truly just melts out of your fucking ears. But let's switch things up a little bit. We're gonna head into some brutal death metal territory with a band known as Eternal Confinement. Oh yes. Now, Eternal Confinement is a bit of an underdeveloped project still, without like a theme or a cohesive sound that binds everything all together. And if that sounds like they play a bunch of random shit, then you'd be like half right. I'm not gonna sit here and say that the members of this band are untalented. They are good musicians, but the problem with their earlier output is that they switch between a lot of different styles and none of them flow very smoothly. I'll explain what I mean. The first song, Cinematic Intervals, off of their debut 2018 EP, Human Conditioning, it starts off pretty good. It goes right into this brutal technical death metal territory with like Deeds of Flesh or Insidious Decrepancy type shit. But then it switches around between like hardcore breakdowns, shouted vocals, punishing grindcore, and on these own, these elements sound okay. It's the way they switch between them. It's so awkward. It just kind of flips and you have no really like context to it. This problem gets more and more prevalent as the EP goes on, and by the time we hit the third track, Demise by Design, it is just an absolute mess. But never fear, my children, for the redemption story of Eternal Confinement is upon us in the form of the 2019 release Immaculate Deception. This time, Eternal Confinement sticks to a definitive brutal death metal sound, and it annihilates any doubts you had about how fucking brutal these guys can truly be. The songs have a much more cohesive flow in how they start and end and what's in between. I feel like the transitions are smoother this time around, and it just all sounds a lot more rehearsed and practiced compared to the first EP. There's also a bit of more of a slam influence on Immaculate Deception. Tracks on like Led Astray display this perfectly. Songs like Ipsidy are so menacing in how they deliver all these flesh-grinding grooves, and I think that the band finally has a direct, violent approach to their music instead of bouncing off the walls all the time. Now, a band, of course, is totally allowed to mix things up and create something really weird and really out there, and that's totally encouraged. I think some of the best metal of this decade was created with this mindset. But the thing is that it all has to flow together, and I feel like Immaculate Deception stripped down to build up the foundation, which is what the band desperately needed. And we have one more group to go over, and we're gonna get a little bit of a breather here because this band goes for a crossover thrash hardcore sound, and I'm talking about Plague, of course. Now, Plague is really fresh. They only formed in about 2018 and only have 2 EPs under their belt. And I think they haven't played much live either, so I'm gonna try to give a pretty exclusive expose here. Plague is nothing complicated. If you know what I mean by thrash crossover combined with hardcore, you know Plague already. They really have pure, simple intentions, pure entertainment value, and making sure your neck is broken by the end of the show. Their debut EP, In Hell, is a cluster of sweet licks, tons of awesome chugging, and a little bit of melodic influence working itself into the solos, like on songs like Welcome Death. Different ways in how Plague plays around with the crossover sound is pretty fun, and you actually get a lot of weird, unexpected moments on this EP that make you just sit back and go like, oh, what the fuck, that was awesome! Vocals too, they're not super flashy, but they do fit the genre and can carry a song pretty well, so I'll accept them. You can make comparisons all day to groups like Iron Reagan or maybe old school stuff like Exodus. Honestly, there really isn't a single thing that In Hell does that disappoints. Then in 2019, Plague dropped another EP called Soul Temptation with a flashy new cover art, a new sound, and 10 times the aggression. There's only 2 tracks on here, so I'll try to discuss them both. First one, No Paradise, just absolutely launches into this 80s style thrash metal. It has tons of amazing chugging riffs and so much groove, your freaking head's gonna fall to the floor. There's some string bending going on and a little bit of that melodic influence again that is in the solos, and it definitely adds a lot of energy to the tone. Also, the production, if you haven't noticed, is a lot more robust and rusty. Then you have the title song, Soul Temptation, which is just a complete groove machine. Its only intention is for you to thrash the nearest guy next to you in the pit. Although, mosh pits might be a thing of the past right now. I think I can see a bit more power trip influence on here, especially in the vocals themselves. They are a bit more guttural, and they have that same echo that you might see on Nightmare Logic. And, you know, personally, I think Riley Gale would have actually liked Plague a lot. Rip Gale, man. So just as with Eternal Confinement, only 2 EPs, but I am so glad that...
Hey
Hey dude, what's going on, man? What? You were supposed to be dead. Oh, me? Nah, I can never die. I'm an eternal manifestation of your endless nightmares. I'll never go away. I killed you with my Polish magic. What the hell are you doing here? Actually, I've been talking to Tyson lately. How did you even get in contact with him? Oh, it's easy. I just hacked into all of your social media and I've been communicating with a ton of different people, man. I got your network going. Thanks? Oh, you don't have to thank me. I mean, you wrote this whole skit, so I mean, are you controlling me or am I controlling you? Oh yeah, man, he told me there's a bunch of new stuff coming out, including an entire Plague album and new Trenchlung music. Plus he's working on some other bands, some really crazy metal shit. There's like an EDM EP coming out as well. Okay. Okay, look, fine. If you're gonna keep coming back over and over, just, can you go for now until I finish this? So that should give you enough context to why Tyson is an absolute unit in how he plays and what he plays. So go support all his bands and check out Carcinogen if you really want that extra context. In the next video, I'll be going over more bands because there is so much that the Windsor scene has to offer. Like I mentioned before, if you want to recommend me stuff, some maybe like forgotten groups that maybe don't exist much on the internet, but you remember from back in the day, if you have live clips, photos, all of that's encouraged. Feel free to comment, send me a DM. I'm really trying to find as much as I can. Support bands and stay fans, motherfuckers. Hails!
That's all I got for you fucks today.